Well, Ecomind was born in a moment when I walked out of a conference on the environmental crises. Well, it was all about the multiple crises, right? Energy and biodiversity and climate change and so many great speakers, all my heroes speaking. And I left after a couple days to go home, and I realized that I felt like I'd just been hit by the proverbial ton of bricks. And on the way home, I thought, wait a minute, I think of myself as mismotivated. And if I'm walking out of this conference feeling just so burdened that I can't even think straight, this is not working. There's got to be another way to think about the problem and to see oneself than what I just experienced. And I didn't know what to do. So I was highly motivated to try to figure out, like, whoa, is there another way? And started reading in environmental literature, particularly in environmental ecological economics, and I started listening, okay, what are the core messages that we're putting out here? And pretty early on in that, I thought, wait, the core messages are not only terrifying, but they are locked into the old mechanical frame of quantities, of not enoughness. And from my earliest years, you know, as a writer, I'd realized that it was this idea of scarcity that was the myth, that the premise of lack was what was keeping us in this spiral of actually creating scarcity, that we were creating scarcity out of plenty. And so I was very suspicious. Coming into it, I realized, to this fundamental notion that there's not enough, because so much of environmental messaging was around, we've hit the limits of a finite Earth, there's not enough, we're overshooting the Earth, we've got to pull back, no growth is the answer. And so I found myself kind of waiting, wait a minute, is there another frame? Is there another way of looking at this that is actually more ecologically aligned and more empowering at the same time? And so I started challenging early on this idea of the fundamental idea of we've hit the limits, because I realized that if we say that our current model is growth, that already associates it with something pretty positive to most people, because we want our grandchildren to grow, we want our flowers to grow, we want our love to grow, and yet we're calling what we're doing growth? Wait a minute, we're blessing something that is really destructive with a good word. So I started challenging that, and I just kept thinking, wait a minute, what we are doing that is causing the problem is not growth. It is a system of waste and destruction, and we've got to figure out how to name that. And just keeping at the level, this destructive consumerism, if you will, that we think of as growth is really a symptom. It is a symptom of a set of assumptions and a system of production and waste that's the problem. It all started with that idea of, no, what if we shifted from this assumption of limits being our problem to the assumption that we are perversely aligned with nature and with human nature. And if we can align with nature and understand human nature to align our social rules with who we really are, that there's not only enough for us all, but there's certainly for all of us, there's enough for us to live in ease and in joy and in creativity. And when I say that, my body changes, you know, because when I hear, we've hit the limits of a finite Earth, I think, bang, 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 you know, everywhere. And when I think of alignment, I think of, I can take a deep breath. And as I align with nature, I can breathe, literally and figuratively. Well, I like to say I'm not an optimist, because I think of an optimist as someone who really claims they can predict the future is going to work out okay. And certainly I'm not a pessimist, because there's so much unknown. And as I developed this idea of the eco-mind, of thinking like an ecosystem, what did I learn about the future? I learned, one, that one of the certainties of life is continuous change. And another is that we're all connected in that continuous change. And from there, then, I become a possibilist, because I can't say that things will turn out badly. I can't say that things will turn out well. All I know is that our choices moment to moment from an Ecomind perspective of connectedness and co-creation, then I know that every choice I'm making is changing the world. I'll, of course, confirm more and more my neuroscience that we see the world, all of us, through mental filters, that we see what we expect to see. And that depends on these core belief systems that are often unconscious, that we don't even realize the filter through which we're seeing. So if we see the world through this frame of scarcity and limits and the bad guys and fear, then that's all we will see. And if we see the world through this mental map of possibility, of this sense of connectedness, continuous change and co-creation, then the possibilities open for us. So see what we look for, and if we're not looking for what is, life-serving, then we're really not going to see it. And so that is why I try to take so many messages that keep us trapped in a false filter, if you will, and try to open us to this worldview, mental map that is ecologically aligned. What keeps life flowing through me, that life force, is the realization that, yes, that it hasn't always been the way it is, all of time, of ourselves and our planet. In fact, this current period of ecological destruction is really almost, most of it, of the great carbon debacle, if you will, is in my lifetime, since I was in high school. Most of the really bad growth of carbon in the atmosphere is since I was in high school, and that's not that long ago. So we are living in an aberration, not necessarily the way our story has to be, or even has been. We evolved in most of our time on this earth was in highly egalitarian tribes, in which there was a great deal of cooperation and a great deal of learning about the environment around us and attuning to that. So the first is, this is not the way it has to be, right? We're living in elaboration. Second is just that we know what the solutions are. They are either right here showing up someplace, or they're just around the corner. I just attended a brilliant conference with scientists from around the world talking about renewable energy. Scientist after scientist said there is no physical obstacle to 100% renewable energy in the next few decades. No physical obstacle. We know how to do this. Germany, cloudy Germany, about the size of Montana, produced half the solar energy in the year 2010. So if Germany can do that, come on already, we know how to do this. So solutions are known, whether they be to hunger or to renewable energy, we know how to do this. Also, I realize that a lot of people care. We think in the United States that we're so divided on such basic issues like climate change, and yet when you ask people, the vast majority want more action on the part of the public sphere on climate change, for example. The vast majority want more solutions coming forth on the part of the public spheres for poverty eradication, for example. So there's a great deal of unity, actually. Beneath all of the images of division, there's a great deal of unity in view, and a lot of people really care and want to make a difference. I think the problem is most of us don't know how. And that's really why I love this kind of program, because it's allowing people to say, oh yes, I could do that. I am not powerless. Well, I think it's so important, and this is the theme of all of my work, is that we each develop a working theory about how we got here. Because if we don't know how we got into this downward spiral, how are we going to really go to the roots and reverse it to a cycle of life? So we need a theory. And sort of my own view, as you now know, is that we are creatures of the mind, and we are locked into a mental map that is actually the causal force taking us down, that we have not fully understood our own nature and the nature of nature. And we are creatures who we create the world according to the ideas that we have. So I think that to empower ourselves, we have to understand what are the dominant ideas that are the root, and then to replace them with life-serving ones. The very practical implication of being a possibilist is, and this idea that we create the world according to the mental map that we have, is an obligation to seek out stories of possibility, because we can actually reshape our mental map. We now know that every thought that we have, it creates neural pathways in our minds, right? We can consciously take control of that. And I don't mean at all, I want to make clear, I don't mean keep the bad news away. I do mean bring in the news of possibility every week, if possible every day. Seek out a story of possibility from somewhere. There's so many wonderful sources now with Yes Magazine, Solutions Journal, so many beautiful websites, Your Olive Tree, for example, I think it's what it's called. So many stories of possibility is what I call them. And then absorb those and spread them. Absorb them and spread them. So we are all learners and sharers, learners and sharers. And that's the way we re-establish this sense of possibility. And this is more important than anything now, because so many people are despairing that depression is a global pandemic, and it's not inevitable. We can all be actively seeking out stories of possibility and actively sharing them every single day, and certainly every week of our lives. So I think that's part of our power.